Do you train hard enough for muscle growth? How hard should you train for muscle growth? So the research is actually clear on this topic when it's conducted appropriately. So when research is conducted appropriately, they find that training to muscle failure is the best way to build muscle, to stimulate muscle growth. Now, there's a lot of caveats that come with that. The first is, are you doing multiple sets? So if you're going to do multiple set training, you inherently could not and should not train to muscle failure, because if you do, you will be overtraining. And if you're overtraining, you're not going to leave enough energy for your body to adapt before the next training session. So really, if you're seeing progress, that is a good indication that what you're doing has been working so far for you. However, in the research, when they train to failure, there are people that do not grow or do not seem to have as big of a response to training when training to failure. This is because they standardize a research training protocol for all the subjects. And all the subjects usually will be performing 3 sets of an exercise, doing probably 6 to 8 exercises in a session. And then the researchers will say that they took all sets to training failure. And then they will also say they did this 3 days a week for 12 weeks, for 16 weeks. If you're actually training properly to failure, there's no way you're going to be doing 3 sets per exercise, and there's no way you're going to be doing that 3 times a week. I'll tell you that right now. So the reason they don't see muscle growth in some studies for some individuals when they have a protocol like this is because those individuals have average genetics, maybe even below average genetics, and they are overtraining. They're simply doing too much training for their bodies to actually recover from, and then also to add additional tissue and adapt to the training. They don't ever say how much they made progress by when the studies for hypertrophy, even though they should and are focused on progressive overload. Usually they don't even discuss the strength progresses. They just go straight to measuring the muscle size. So that's, not focusing on the right things, because we know for muscle growth, you want to train to failure and you want to be progressively overloading. So the best way to do this, and the way that they should be recording it, is by doing 1 set to failure. 1 set to failure is going to ensure that you trained hard enough and you also did not overtrain by the amount of work that you put in, because you need to leave space for your body to recover and adapt. If you're going to train to failure and do multiple sets and train multiple days a week, then you're really not letting your body adapt. You might barely feel recovered enough before you do another workout. So are you training hard enough? You want to train to failure. Now, some researchers will say that you need to leave 2 reps in reserve. That 2 reps in reserve, 1 rep in reserve, training to failure, it's all going to get you about the same muscle growth response, and that really taking it to failure just adds so much more fatigue that your body just can't recover from, and your nervous system is going to be fried. Well, that's not true. There is more stimulus to be gained when you take it to failure. Like I said, you just have to weigh it against how much work are you really going to do. And you have to remember that muscle growth is not about how much work you do. It's about turning on the growth mechanism. It's about flipping that switch. And once you stimulate growth and you flip that switch, you don't have to keep flipping it on and off. When you go up to a light bulb in your house, you don't keep flipping the switch on and off. You just flip it on and then it's on. That's the way muscle growth works, and that's the way that you would want to train in order to stimulate that. So how hard should you train? You should train until you cannot perform another positive rep with a certain load, with a certain tempo in the prescribed training program. So that's how hard you want to train. And in order to train this hard, you're not going to want to use too heavy of a load. You're not going to want to use too light of a load. You want to find a moderate weight that you can take to failure safely in an exercise that it's safe to do so as well. And that will be the most you can do to stimulate muscle growth. So how hard should you train? To failure. Now, do most people train to failure? No. Do a lot of people think they train to failure? Yes, and I was one of those. I thought I was training to failure because I would train until I couldn't do another rep. However, I was swinging the weight, I was using too much weight, and I just would tack on multiple sets. So hopefully this video helped you understand how hard should you train. It's not until it's uncomfortable or until it burns. In fact, that's kind of when the workout and the exercise really gets going, it really starts. So push past that, overcome the mental challenges of training to failure, and train until the muscles cannot produce another repetition. That is your goal when you train to failure, and that is how you do it. So hopefully this gave you some instruction on how to train to failure, as well as how hard you should push yourself in order to make sure that you are crossing the threshold of what it would take to stimulate muscle growth.